Hey, everybody. Are you future-proof and future-ready? Today, we're going to talk about 4 big ideas that will impact you and your career and everyone else. So let's dive right in. Big idea number 1 is fusion power. This, by the way, is even bigger than AI. This is huge for the future, for the world, and for each of us. Why? Well, they've been working on fusion power since the 1950s. That's 70 years. However, 3 years ago was the first major breakthrough. Scientists achieved breakthrough in nuclear fusion. The U.S. lab successfully sparked a fusion reaction that released more energy than went into it, but there's still a long way to go. And we're going to find out why fusion energy is so important in just a minute. But this is the single biggest trend that's going to change everything. So first, let's go back to about just under a year from now. The race for nuclear fusion is heating up. So fast forward 2 years from the original breakthrough, scientists have been searching for a way to produce nuclear fusion reactions for decades. Governments and private companies have been pumping huge levels of investment into scientific research aimed at achieving nuclear fusion. This is because fusion could generate 4 times more energy per kilogram of fuel than existing nuclear fission power plants. That's 4 times, folks. The IEA, the International Energy Agency, defines nuclear fusion as the process where 2 light atomic nuclei combine to form a single heavier one, while releasing massive amounts of energy. This is the exact same process in our star, the sun. Fusion reactions take place in a state of matter called plasma, which is a hot charged gas. Nuclei need to collide with each other at extremely high temperatures, around 10 million degrees Celsius. Think about that. So that is why they've been working on this for 70 years, because it is extremely difficult. So after the NIF success of 2022 and 2024, scientists at the UK-based Jet Laboratory achieved more energy production through a fusion process than anywhere ever before. So in 2 years, they made another huge step in progression. While the US and UK have made significant strides in nuclear fusion, it's an Asian power that's expected to move ahead of the competition in the coming years. You know who that is. In China, the government is pumping huge quantities of funding into nuclear fusion research, between an estimated billion and 1.5 billion a year, whereas for comparison, the U.S. government is only funding about half as much. As a result, China is moving at a record pace. There's a Shanghai-based startup called Energy Singularity, which has attracted $112 million of investment already. And they've used this funding to become the first in the world to use a new kind of advanced magnet. This could help shrink the size of fusion reactors much smaller than the large-scale reactors like the ITER in France, which is the international collaboration. We'll talk about that in a minute. By contrast, many of the U.S. tokamaks are way outdated, which has led our country to rely on newer machines in Japan, Europe, and the UK to advance its research. There are no modern fusion facilities in American labs today. Nevertheless, the U.S. is continuing to advance its fusion research with the help of lasers. And I'll explain what most other places are doing because it's quite different. So let's fast forward to January of this year. Chinese researchers break world record for fusion reaction for the second time, sustaining a nuclear fusion reaction at 100 million degrees Celsius for 1,066 seconds. That is by far the longest and the highest temperature. So this was at the Institute for Plasma Physics at the Hefei Institute of Physical Science. This is another milestone in China's quest to win the ongoing nuclear fusion race between China, the U.S., Japan, South Korea, and the European Union. China's been making very rapid progress over the last decade and now owns more fusion patents than any other country. To me, what's more important than the number is actually how fast they are doing this, said Jean-Paul Alain, who leads the U.S. Energy Department's Office of Fusion Energy. And then they talk about energy singularity that we've already talked about, but they are giving China a first mover advantage in the critical field of high temperature superconducting magnetic confinement fusion, which is different than what the big project in France and most other facilities around the world use. We will quickly break that down in a minute. So how did this little-known Chinese company manage to pull off in 2 years what the huge ITER facility has failed to achieve in almost 20 years? According to Yang, the head of it, they're using high-temperature superconducting materials that can reduce the volume of a device to about 2% of what a traditional tokamak fusion reactor is in size. So that's a 98% reduction in size. That's why the Chinese are now ahead. So in fusion, they talk about Q value, which is energy in to create the reaction and the amount of energy out. A Q value greater than 1 means the reactor generates more energy than it consumes. Currently, the greatest Q factor achieved is 1.53. But energy singularity is not the only fusion startup that's pursuing smaller reactor designs. Devon, Massachusetts-based Commonwealth Fusion Systems is collaborating with MIT to build their small fusion reactor called Spark. This would produce enough power to power a small city. So the Chinese have jumped out ahead with superior technology, which is not surprising. Why? Because they are the manufacturing hub of the world. That's why. But in the meantime, the huge international project in France is proceeding. The International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, ITER, has just completed the final component of its pulsed superconducting electromagnet system, the world's largest and most powerful in a landmark moment for fusion research. And this is May 1st of this year, so only a few months ago. Nuclear fusion has long been considered the answer to zero-emission, byproduct-free energy generation. This is why it's so critical. No toxic waste, unlimited power, no bad emissions at all. So this ITER magnet system, they finished the last component of it in May. They actually just finished installing it in September, so the magnet is now complete there. The whole tokamak, which is the traditional low temperature, that's 10 million degrees Celsius versus the 100 million degrees Celsius project in China, is now in final assembly phase. So that project is nearing completion as well. So you can see a few things here. There's brand new technologies that are rapidly evolving, and then there's this 20-year massive international project that is nearing testing. This is why I'm doing this segment on fusion power, because fusion power in 2025 literally shifted from if we can ever do this to when we can do it. It will definitely be successful now. And we'll talk about right now when that's going to start to happen, the first commercial fusion reactor, which changes everything. In the meantime, another startup based in Germany, Proxima Fusion, announced receiving $150 million in financing, the largest private fusion investment round in European history. That's the final piece, is more and more and more money pouring into fusion to make it successful, which guarantees essentially its success. The latest round brings Proxima Fusion's total funding to more than $200 million, aimed at helping the company build the world's first commercial fusion power plant. And they're using a slightly different design called a stellarator. The stellarator is more complicated to build than the tokamak that's being built in France and elsewhere. However, the stellarator is expected to produce a more stable plasma, which means a more efficient system. So many approaches now in active development to fusion. Not clear yet which one will win, but one of them will win, or more than one. Thanks to the new funding, Proxima Fusion aims to complete its hardware demonstrator model in 2027. So this thing will go into basically pilot scale production in 2 years. Proxima also finalized the site for its alpha demonstrator stellarator, and the site is scheduled to begin operations in 2031. And so is Commonwealth Fusion Systems, by the way. So that's multiple reactors going online by early 2030s, as soon as 2030. That Proxima Fusion I just talked about, since that $150 million it raised, has raised yet another $15 million from other investors. Now we get up to just last month. China's spent up to $13 billion already developing fusion energy since 2023. So that's $13 billion in 2 years, folks. and could commercially replicate star power to generate electricity by 2030. Doing so would give the Chinese Communist Party the potential to reshape global geopolitics and dominate a new energy era, MIT physicists warn. So that's how big a deal fusion is. It could change the world order. That's why I'm talking about this, and particularly related to AI, with the dramatically increasing energy demands of ever bigger models. Fusion is essential to supporting further development of AI. That's exactly why I'm talking about this. The U.S. must prioritize fusion energy development to outpace the CCP's aggressive timelines, said Randy Weber, Texas State House member, or China will dominate the most consequential breakthrough of this century. That is why I said at the beginning, this is bigger than AI. Unlimited, clean energy completely transforms the world. And sorry. And in a later segment, I'm going to explain exactly why. The U.S. must prioritize this development and boost funding to match China's investment, coordinate research and development with allies, and establish fusion demonstration programs. So there's a big push to get a one-time $10 billion allocation from Congress right now to facilitate fusion development. This is through the Department of Energy, but as we all know, the government is shut down right now. So one of the people testifying last month in front of Congress advocating for this was the CEO of Commonwealth Fusion. So check this out. The U.S.'s fusion industry has grown from 23 companies that raised $1.78 billion in private capital in 2021 to 53 companies that raised $10.6 billion in 2024. So 10 times as much capital is going into this only 3 years later. That's crazy. A fusion demonstration program similar to DOE's Advanced Fission Reactor program would accelerate deployment of at least 3 different fusion power plant approaches. So this $10 billion investment is needed. It's essential. It would be milestone-based cost-sharing funding, which means that you have to hit certain technical milestones and you'd have to share cost 50-50 or whatever it ends up being. I agree that this $10 billion injection would go a long way to setting us on course, Oak Ridge National Laboratory Fusion Energy Division Director Troy Carter said. The decisive moment is upon us. The U.S. fusion industry is on the cusp of commercialization, said Pacific Fusion founder and President Will Reagan in his testimony. Today, we're at the last mile of solving the key scientific challenges to establishing commercial deployment. And then from days ago, October 1st, so we're talking 3 days ago, China just advanced another pawn in the high-stakes international battle to achieve commercial nuclear fusion. Because of its high energy output and lack of hazardous waste output, nuclear fusion is touted as the silver bullet solution for the future of energy. According to the Rand Corp, a huge think tank, whoever masters it will gain enormous advantages economically, strategically, and national security. So this is a massive first mover advantage. That is why they're looking at funding $10 billion in the US, and they're already funding billions in China and elsewhere beyond those two countries. China has not yet achieved net positive energy generation yet, but that could soon change. Experts speculate the newest Chinese fusion facility in Mianyang, Sichuan, sorry for that pronunciation, is a laser-based facility, sort of like the National Laser Facility in the US, but much, much larger. And it will feature two different types of technology rather than one. It's likely just a matter of time before Beijing pulls far ahead in the nuclear fusion race. And now, just this week, Beijing has unveiled another step forward in its nuclear fusion experiments. This is wild. China has developed and successfully tested the largest ever radiation-proof robot to use in its nuclear fusion facilities. This will blow your mind. The three-armed machine is capable of lifting a whopping 60 tons of weight, making it an ideal piece of machinery for performing maintenance operations for massive nuclear fusion facilities. So that's how the Chinese think, folks. They approach problems holistically, not just developing and creating and commercializing the technology, but working on all aspects of what's needed now to operate the coming commercial nuclear fusion plant. And then finally on this topic, the global nuclear fusion energy market for the next 20 years. This is from Future Markets. Nuclear fusion energy stands at the precipice of commercial viability after decades of scientific pursuit. Unlike conventional nuclear fission, fusion promises abundant clean energy with minimal radioactive waste and no risk of meltdown. By the way, there's a fission reactor, the largest in the world, that's on the verge of meltdown right now in Ukraine because the Russians destroyed the electric connection to the reactors at this plant, and the cooling systems are now running on emergency backup generators, one of which has already failed. So that's pretty serious, this meltdown problem. The fusion industry has experienced unprecedented growth since 2021, with private and public investment hitting $10 billion last month in September 2025. Several approaches are competing for market dominance. There's magnetic containment fusion, which is using magnets to contain the plasma. That is tokamaks and stellarators that we've already talked about, and it is the most mature technology right now. Then there's inertial confinement fusion that has gained momentum through the National Institute here in the US, their breakthrough. So that's laser. While alternative approaches like magnetized target fusion, which is pursued by the company General Fusion, and Z-pinch technology from Zap Energy have attracted substantial investment. The fusion market currently consists primarily of pre-revenue technology developers, specialized component suppliers, and strategic investors. So the reason that we're near commercialization is because the entire ecosystem needed to have a real industry is being built out right now. Major energy corporations, including Chevron, Eni and Shell have made strategic investments, signaling growing confidence in fusion's commercial potential. Government funding also remains crucial. Near-term projections suggest the first commercial fusion power plants will begin operation between 2030 and 2035, and multiple will come online in that period, each one capable of powering a small, medium, or large-sized city. The fusion energy sector could reach 40 to 80 billion by 2036 and exceed 350 billion in revenue by 2050. So that's 25 years, a massive industry in revenue. There's very few industries that are bigger than 350 billion. There are some, but not many. Initial deployment will likely focus on grid-scale baseload power generation, with hydrogen production and industrial heat applications following as the technology matures. The fusion energy sector has unprecedented momentum. The U.S. still leads global fusion development, with 29 companies pursuing various approaches to achieve commercial viability, with Commonwealth Fusion Systems the furthest along, having raised almost $1 billion so far, with NVIDIA joining as a first-time investor in Commonwealth alongside Google, Khosla Ventures, and Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy Ventures. So that's big idea number one. Fusion power is on the way, folks, and it will change everything. And I'll give you a preview of it. I was fortunate enough to be in Paris for 5 days last year. And for the Olympics, the city of Paris mandated that only electric vehicles, which we'll talk about later, could be in the city center of Paris during the Olympics. The effect was astounding. The air was crystal clear, number one, and number two, it was quiet. I was in this huge city with my family, and there was very little traffic noise. It was a completely different experience than being in New York, say. It was an amazing transformation, and fusion power combined with other things that we will talk about today will bring this to reality. Game-changing for air pollution and other things. So that's big idea number one. Big idea number two, shifting labor markets happening right now. This is huge, and it is critical for you to pay attention to. Absolutely critical. Why are labor markets shifting? It's AI, but it is not only AI. So let's talk about that. And these are U.S. government statistics, which, despite what you've heard in the news recently, generally speaking, are quite reliable, among the most reliable in the world. How do I know that? Because I'm a statistician, among other things, at work. So I know what statistics are good and what aren't. Preliminary measures for the second quarter of 2025 were announced today for the non-financial corporate sector. So the government looks at productivity for the financial sector, which is banks, investment banks, private equity, venture capital, etc., separately from the rest of the economy. Productivity increased 5.7% in the second quarter of 2025. That is a very high productivity increase, the highest in years, Why did that happen? Because output increased 7%, but hours worked only increased 1.2%. So how did output increase so much with a very modest increase in hours worked? AI. Hello, AI. Productivity increased 3.4% over the last 4 quarters. So productivity is the biggest driver of economic success, the biggest. This was confirmed in a book I listened to recently by Ray Dalio, who is one of the founders of Bridgewater Capital, which is one of the largest investment firms in the world. And he said that. He said productivity is the biggest single factor in economic success. The man should know. Now, the other source of information I'm going to talk about right now is the U.S. Federal Reserve, which runs the banking system. And every quarter, the Federal Reserve sets interest rates, but they also produce what's called the Beige Book. That basically makes clear why things happened in the economy that happened in the most recent quarter. The Fed's latest Beige Book released yesterday reported little to no economic growth across the 12 regions it tracks. Now, that is because of the impact of the tariffs. This is not because of AI or anything else. This is U.S. government policy has temporarily inhibited growth. In New York, consumers cited rising costs of insurance and utilities. In San Francisco, economic activity edged down slightly. Data center construction was a bright spot. More broadly, tariff-related uncertainty weighed on business owners, and AI-driven automation impacted the labor market. This is the first time that the policymakers who determine the direction of the economy in the United States specifically called out AI affecting the labor market. We're going to get right now the reason why AI is affecting the labor market, and it's exactly why you need to pay attention. So this is an article that interviewed a bunch of people in Bloomberg, but they're talking to people at Amazon at the moment, specifically the chief financial officer of Amazon, which is basically the largest company on the planet now. We're going to continue to be careful on what we invest in, and we're going to continue to invest in new things and new areas and things that resonate with customers. So that's how successful companies succeed, is they follow the customer relentlessly. Why? Because the customer writes the check that produces revenue, that pays employees, pays for all the operating costs. The customer determines everything. So check this out and listen carefully beyond important for you and your future prospects of employment. That is the way the American capitalist systems work, says Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, which is the preeminent private analytics firm, the number one. Capitalism is ruthless when it gets down to striving for profitability and creating wealth. It redirects resources very rapidly from one place to another. So what does that mean? Let's hear more right now. And please pay attention if you know what's good for you. Starry-eyed AI execs argue that as workers become more productive, companies will make more money, resulting in more growth and more jobs. It's true, as I said a few minutes ago, to start off this big idea number 2, shifting labor markets, productivity rules. Tech workers themselves aren't so sure, and we're going to talk in detail about that in 1 second, and neither are economists. The tech sector may be able to produce a lot and innovative lot without as many people going forward, Zandy, the Moody's economist, said. That is a lesson of AI. So they're saying clearly that AI directly impacts tech sector jobs, one of the largest sectors of business in the United States economy. Healthcare is probably the biggest, but tech is probably number 2. Once glitzy, high-paying, and highly coveted, tech jobs have become less secure and less attractive to many in recent years. Going back 10 years ago, everyone wanted to work at Google. The company I was at that time, we literally could not get employees because we were in the New York metro area, and everyone literally wanted to work at Google and Amazon in the city. We couldn't get employees. For a former Meta user experience researcher in the Bay Area, the job hunt has been tough since her layoff last April. I went to tech because of the perception of stability, she said, about joining the tech industry, yet here we are. So where is that? U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics Employment Situation Summary. This is the next to latest one. Total non-farm payroll employment changed little in July and has shown little change since April. So since April, there's basically been no net new employment, and it's October, so that's 6 months. Employment continued to trend up in healthcare and in social assistance. I'll talk about that in a minute. Among the unemployed, the number of new entrants increased by 275,000 in the month of July alone to just under 1 million. New entrants are unemployed people who are looking for their first job. So this is specific quantitative confirmation of what's all over the news now, that college grads from this year can't find jobs, certainly not in tech, but in other areas as well, because employment gains have flatlined. There's 2 reasons for that, 2 big reasons. AI is one of them, which is why I'm talking about this big idea number 2 and the shifting labor market. But there's also the tariffs and the economy, because obviously the general economy affects whether the economy is adding jobs, flatlined like right now, or shedding jobs, which it does in a recession. Employment showed little change over the month in other major industries outside of healthcare and social assistance. Revisions for May and June were larger than normal, and as you know, the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics got fired for this, but it was not for the right reason. I will explain. The change in total non-farm payroll employment for May was revised down by 125,000 from 144,000 to only 19,000. And the change for June was revised down by 133,000 from 147,000 to only 14,000. With these revisions, employment in May and June combined is 258,000 lower than previously reported. So let me say this about these kind of statistics that's really important. First of all, they lag. They're always revised because they are never current. They always, more and more information continually comes in from the economy, and the reporting lags. So that means that numbers are always revised. So that's totally normal. But what is happening here is, again, due to the two things happening, the general economy and tariffs, and AI mitigating hiring in multiple sectors. And those sectors specifically are technology, customer service, and I'll think of the other one in a second. But these are sectors that traditionally have hired a lot of college graduates every year, and it's not there now. Why? AI plus general economy not doing great. So that's big idea number 2. Labor markets are shifting. What does that mean for you? I will talk about that at the end after all 4 big ideas. But it's time now for big idea number 3, which is robotics. Exponential growth in robotics now. We'll talk about why and how and what that means. And it is diversifying right now into more and more industries. So this is big idea number 3, robotics. So the first reason, why is this happening? Check this out from multiple companies. Oslo-based agricultural robot startup Saga Robotics raises $11.2 million. This is all very recent, by the way. Vayu Robotics, an urban navigation robot startup backed by Khosla Ventures, just went public on the NASDAQ stock exchange, raising millions of dollars. ARX Robotics, a German builder of self-driving battlefield robots, raised $31 million. VC funding for robotic startups has reversed course in Europe and is on track to reach record levels in 2025. One big reason is AI, which of course is why I'm talking about this. Unlocking more scalable and commercially viable uses for robotics in healthcare, logistics, and defense, among other areas. So robotics success is entirely tied to AI, but AI is now exponential as of this year. So that means robotics is now exponential. And finally, on this massive money raising, X Square Robot, a Chinese robotics startup, I just did a video on them recently, raised $140 million in new funding led by Alibaba's cloud unit. Then there's this study by Market and Technology, humanoid robots over the next 10 years. So this is a market forecast for 10 years of humanoid robotics for key automotive, logistics, and that's the only 2 industries in this study. But the notable thing out of this study is 1 million humanoid robots being produced a year by 2030. That's 1 million every single year. And increasing, still increasing, only 5 years from now. I've said it a few times now. I'll say it again here. If you've never watched the movie I, Robot, watch it, because that is what is coming. And for those of you who have seen it, psychologically prepare now to see humanoid robots everywhere, everywhere. So let's dive into one company just as an example to show you why big idea number 3 is robotics tied to AI. San Francisco-based Bedrock Robotics emerged from stealth today. So a lot of companies start out where they don't say anything, no one knows what's going on, and then they come out of stealth when they have a product. They announced $80 million in seed and Series A backing in its mission to develop advanced autonomous systems for the global construction industry. According to McKinsey & Company, one of the biggest consulting firms in the world, this is a $13 trillion opportunity for construction robots. You heard that right. 13 trillion of potential revenue. Massive, beyond massive. Rather than design and sell new machinery like other robotics companies in the construction sector like Teleo, this startup, Bedrock Robotics, upgrades customers' existing heavy equipment fleets. What does that allow? Much more rapid adoption of fully autonomous vehicles in the construction sector. So this is focused on upgrading customers' existing heavy equipment fleets. It does so with reversible same-day hardware and software installs to enable fully autonomous operations. So did you catch that? Bedrock Robotics can switch a bulldozer or other heavy piece of equipment from human-operated to fully autonomous in one day. One day. The latest funding rounds will help Bedrock grow its engineering, operations, and commercialization teams and deepen partnerships to reach its target of initial operatorless deployment next year, 2026. The company was founded just last year, 2024, by 3 former Waymo engineering leaders. Company executives believe the U.S. needs to build like never before for data centers to power the AI revolution, for clean energy infrastructure, new housing units. There's a huge housing shortage right now, in case you weren't aware of that, but most people are now. And manufacturing facilities, because construction companies currently can't keep up anywhere close to demand. This enables building at the speed of societal need. Why? The company says its technology bridges the expanding gap between rapidly rising domestic infrastructure needs and shrinking workforce capacity. In 2024, investment in U.S. manufacturing facilities reached a record $238 billion, according to Deloitte, one of the biggest accounting firms in the world. There's a shortage today of 500,000 construction workers just in the United States, with 40% of current construction workers expected to retire in the next decade. Why? The biggest generation in U.S. history is rapidly retiring right now. This is going to hit other industries as well, as you will hear next in big idea number 4. We are empowering construction teams with advanced automation they can trust. We helped put the first fully autonomous vehicles in public roads because these guys were all at Waymo. Our team also brings experience scaling high-scale cloud systems and operational expertise from growing companies like Uber Freight to $5 billion in revenue. So Uber Freight now $5 billion in revenue a year. That's a big number. One breakthrough that enabled Waymo's impressive scale was shifting from traditional robotics approaches to dominantly machine learning and data-driven system. Machine learning is still alive and well, folks. He says that construction equipment faces the same challenge, operating safely and precisely in unpredictable environments across many types of complex tasks. The same ML approaches that enabled superhuman driving are critical for truly competent and scalable construction systems. So why did he say superhuman driving? Because fully autonomous Ubers are 5 times safer than human drivers. That's why. It's a fact. By integrating with existing construction means and workflows, the Bedrock operator powers machines with expert capabilities, empowering builders with the ability to work 24/7, not just one shift. Accelerate project schedules, increase profitability. How? Take a guess. And safety, and track progress autonomously on jobs. This will combine superhuman safety with unparalleled visibility around equipment, this system that Bedrock has created. Environmental understanding allows for the navigation of hills, trenches, boulders, and obstacles on the job site while molding the land to the exact defined plan. Real-time intelligence allows users to view metrics on progress and performance so they have the data needed to keep critical projects on track. The system integrates 8 cameras with LiDAR for a 360-degree field of view and a high-fidelity understanding of the work area. Starting with excavators, the company system is already running on machines at customer construction sites in Arizona, Texas, and Arkansas. Bedrock Robotics teamed with 3 other Texas firms recently. So this is going to roll out very, very quickly. So let's take a holistic, quick view of robotics and where it's at. So some robot technologies are already mature and saturating the market. What are those? Palletizing and material handling in warehouses. What's the result? You do not want to get a warehouse job today. You don't want to do that. Get a different kind of job. You will be unemployed, but it's broader than that. Stamping and assembly in manufacturing, painting and welding, picking and sorting, quality inspection, labeling, and cleaning. All that stuff, all those areas of function are already mature markets, meaning you're going to see robots everywhere doing this stuff now. It's proven, it's commercialized, it's scaling rapidly, it's going to saturate the market. What are growing areas of robotics? Sanding and polishing, wafer handling and semiconductor plants, cutting, quality inspection of certain types, research for various applications, and surgery. Surgery is a big one that is coming. It's already here. I told you my friend had open heart surgery and a robot did the whole thing. No human touched him during that surgery. So what does that mean? That means there's industries being completely disrupted over the next 5 to 10 years by robotics that you do not want to be in. So a recap for these first 3 out of 4. Fusion power will put AI on steroids with unlimited electric generation to increase what it can do. Bigger and bigger and bigger models. And shifting labor markets because of that AI automation. Added to that, idea 3 is robotics that's going to disrupt many, many, many industries, including retail shortly. What is big idea number 4? Autonomy. And this is another big area set for disruption. These are 2 different exponential technologies coming together now. So those are EVs and AI. So why am I going to talk about EVs? Because in many parts of the world, unlike the US, EVs are being mandated and will be 100% of cars sold by 10 years from now. But the biggest EV makers are in China. So this first thing I'm going to briefly cover is already 11 months old. Chinese car makers make a big statement in Paris Auto Show despite trade tariffs. Europe is a must-have market for Chinese OEMs. So they talk about striking market dynamics. Change was in the air this year at the Paris Auto Show because Chinese car makers of all segments and sizes were the hottest talking points this year, from sub $20,000 cars all the way to 1,200 horsepower electric hypercars. So unlike other areas of the world where electric vehicles have been relegated only to the premium segment so far, Chinese automakers have already produced cars across the spectrum of auto purchasing. The European car market is currently in a challenging position. 2024 sales were poor for EVs. The slowdown was mostly attributed to poor economic circumstances in 2024 in Germany, the largest car market in Europe. 2025 will bring major changes to the market. 2025 will see a major reduction in the permissible fleet average CO2 targets of car companies, and it's only the first step to zero emissions mandated by 2035, as I mentioned. So, entering into this already complicated situation are Chinese car manufacturers. IDTechX Research, and they're one of the top research firms in the world, firmly places the Chinese car market as the largest EV market in the world by far, by the way. Sales reached 50% of all new car sales last year in 2024 versus less than 5% in the United States. But this is what's coming almost everywhere on the globe except here. And eventually it will happen here due to no choice. This growth in scale has led to decreased cost of production, which opened up those lower cost cars. The fast growth has also led to a scramble for market share and an ensuing price war. The U.S. is bigger than Europe in car volume, but 100% tariffs are keeping the Chinese out. Europe is the next largest car market in the world, so number 3, and that's why the Chinese are going after it. Also because smaller cars are more popular in Europe than big cars due to cost. Also, European legacy automakers have only offered EVs for premium markets, so there's basically no competition for Chinese cars in the low end and the middle end of the spectrum of cost. And finally, the European market has regulations driving all of this. So Europe does have lower tariffs, 10%, but the Chinese car makers are already planning local production in European factories that bypass tariffs altogether. So the Chinese are going to take over the world in EVs shortly. American car companies, because of the tariffs, have a chance to catch up, but if they don't catch up in the next 5 years, they will get swamped. So there's one other reason why EVs, beyond the fact that they're a natural complement to AI, and in most of the world, regulations are driving the adoption of EVs. And sorry, bad allergies right now. So what they're doing with EVs is starting to make them bi-directional. That means that they use electricity to charge, but they will, going forward, be able to push electricity back to the grid. That is huge for stabilizing the grid, particularly when wind and solar isn't working, because most people charge their EVs at night at home. So that will really stabilize the grid. And then a growing number of battery electric vehicles now offer charging your home, running your power at your home, and charging loads on vehicles. So that's why EVs. But now let's talk about autonomous vehicles, which is the main topic of this big idea, number 4. And they're talking about mobility VC. 2025 is the year of the comeback. So that's been this year. So people still need to get from point A to point B. And there's a huge proportion of people, especially in cities, that do not own cars. In fact, most people in New York City don't own cars. Why? Because it's very expensive for parking. And it's a hassle. You have to constantly move them, especially in Manhattan. The demand for smarter, greener, and more efficient ways to get around is only growing, and cities are doubling down on EV charging infrastructure. There are practical solutions coming that will solve real-world problems. Mobility AI is really growing. Autonomous vehicles to get around cities. In fact, the biggest cities eventually, like Paris, London, New York, etc., will go 100% autonomous. You will not be allowed to drive your car into Manhattan below Central Park, for example. And the start of that was the congestion pricing that costs like $15 now to drive your car into Manhattan. That will not last long. Why are autonomous vehicles now exponential? There's 2 reasons. The first is all of the components that drive successful autonomous driving are now exponentially improving. For example, today, Dallas-based Texas Instruments introduced a new portfolio of automotive LiDAR, clock, and radar chips to help automakers transform vehicle safety to a wider range of cars. They claim industry first in high-speed LiDAR laser driving. LiDAR is essential for autonomy because it can see things at night like optical cameras can't, and it can see things in bad weather like radar can't. So the adoption of autonomous driving features is accelerating right now based on key motivators from the OEM. Why? Because car companies currently offer what's called level 2 autonomy, which is just car parking and lane assist, telling you when you're out of your lane and stuff like that. So consumers are starting to push for level 3, which is you still have to pay attention, but the car drives autonomously. So consumers are now pushing for it. And sensors are key. So that is why TI developed this next generation, much better, much cheaper system to promote autonomous driving. But they're not the only ones. Ava partners with LG Innotek to bring next generation LiDAR platform to market. And LG is part of the LG Group in Korea. This is a LiDAR perception platform for a range of industries, not just self-driving, including automotive, industrial automation, robotics, and consumer devices. So these sensors enable SAE level 3 and 4 autonomous driving. 4 is completely self-driving vehicle. So if all the components are exponentially improving, then all you need is exponentially improving AI, which is here. VC-backed Plus, the developer of AI-powered driving software for freight trucking, is being listed on the NASDAQ. So this is a separate company from Aurora bringing in millions and millions of dollars and getting ready to put their trucks on the road. And speaking of that, Aurora begins first commercial driverless trucking operation in Texas. These trucks, there's no driver in the cab, and these aren't remote controlled trucks. These things are fully autonomous, running themselves. Aurora Innovation launched its commercial autonomous trucking service this week following the closure of its safety case with regulators, beginning driverless customer deliveries between Dallas and Houston. This milestone made it the first company to operate a commercial self-driving service with heavy-duty trucks on public roads. So Aurora, with a safety driver, has completed millions of miles, but now fully driverless. SAE level 4 being deployed in the southern United States. And if you want a preview of what that looks like, watch the movie Logan, if you haven't, with the autonomous trucks going by at over 100 miles an hour in caravans. That is what is coming. And their launch customers for Aurora are Uber Freight, which is massive now, $5 billion in revenue, and Hirschbach Motor Lines, which is the run from Dallas to Houston. And so these have been going since April. And here's what's going to happen. Most states, including Texas, allow for driverless vehicles. Aurora's delivered over 10,000 customer loads already, over 3 million miles. So this technology is now mature and starting to roll out. Now, why is it rolling out in the southern United States first? Because they don't have snow and ice. That is why. Rain is one thing, snow and ice is totally different. So they're going to roll these things out across the entire southern tier of the United States by next year, 2026. These things will start to be everywhere. Then eventually, they will solve the issue of snow. Ice, you can't solve that one. If it's an ice storm, stay off the roads. That's everybody. But snow, they'll be able to solve that within a couple of years. But in the meantime, it's an algorithm. It's very, very quickly building up millions and millions and millions of miles to get better and better and better, which is why it's going to roll out very, very quickly. And then we talked about shared mobility. The transportation industry is undergoing a seismic shift because urban centers struggle with congestion, pollution, and decarbonization, and people can't afford new cars. Now, that's why the used car market is going crazy now, because new cars have gotten very, very expensive. And if you're going to spend $1,000 a month on a new car for something that has zero value at the end, that's a bad, bad investment. I would never do that. I've watched too many videos from top investors on YouTube to buy a new car. Now, that money goes to work in the markets. But the biggest inefficiencies they talk about, and I'm going to really shorten this because we're running over, is human operators, because humans can stop work at any time. They're not available at times. So humans are unpredictable and erratic, whereas autonomous vehicles can run 24/7, 365, just like in construction. So autonomy is going to disrupt ride sharing, grocery delivery, etc. Other job sectors you do not want to be in. Now, the news hasn't been all good in the autonomous vehicle space. Tesla's woes reverberate throughout the clean energy sector. So they talk about how Tesla's car sales have fallen very, very sharply due to a number of things. But in particular, they call out, the fact that Tesla is way behind now in autonomous driving software. It's light years behind the Chinese companies. And this has spilled over now into their energy storage business. First drop in sales ever in 2024 in energy storage. So this is not good news for Tesla in particular. And they're lucky that this U.S. market is not open to the Chinese yet, or they would be seriously suffering, like potentially out of business suffering, because the reports all say the Chinese cars at comparable price are better, and they have much cheaper cars too. And then final example on autonomous, this is brand new last month, September. Early stage autonomous truck technology company Bot Auto announced today the successful completion of its first humanless hub-to-hub validation run within the city of Houston. And up next is long distance runs to San Antonio and then all across the southern United States. So what does this all sum up for big idea number 4? Self-driving has hit maturity. The components are getting better and better and better every single year. The AI is getting better and better every single year. So in the near future, we're going to see level 3 autonomy, which is you still need to pay attention and watch. That'll be within the next 5 years, becoming ubiquitous everywhere, and then in the 2030s, fully autonomous, many, many, many cars. So the question at the beginning was, are you future-proof? And we talked about 4 big things that are going on right now. fusion power, which puts AI on steroids because then there's no limit to how much power can be consumed, and it's clean power. Number two, shifting labor markets. Already seriously impacted is tech jobs, customer service jobs, and I think the third one was retail. And then robotics is really going to put that in steroids. A robot can keep inventory in a store much more accurately and much better in presentation than a human can. So you will see robots soon in retail stores. They've been there out west for a while and in China for quite a while, but this is going to become a common sight in retail and other industries because robotics is rapidly diversifying across industries now. And then big idea number 4, autonomous vehicles. You don't want to be a truck driver. And similarly, as I said, related to the shifting labor markets, you don't want to be working in a warehouse. So what does all this mean for you? You gotta change careers, as I've said over and over, to a job that requires the human touch. And there's many of them. There's, of course, many in healthcare. There is many in social assistance. This is counseling. And then if you want to go for a degree, psychology. And if you really want to go for a degree, psychiatry, those will require the human touch still for quite a while. Electrician, plumbing, retail will take a while for full automation. But the things you don't want to be in is coding, customer service, marketing. Marketing was the third one. Marketing is being decimated by AI. You don't need entry-level marketing people anymore. Google Gemini 2.5 Pro can do anything an entry-level marketing person can do and more. So, but the reality is that anyone who tells you that many, many jobs are not going to be negatively impacted by AI, by robotics, by autonomy is flat out wrong. And you do not want to put yourself in that position. Don't put yourself in that position. Be proactive. Start now to get the training you need to do something, first and foremost, you're going to like doing, something you'll enjoy because you work more than you do anything else in life. That's number one. But number 2 requires the human touch. And you want to do this quickly. By the way, I am honored to be on the Chief Financial Officer panel for the Federal Reserve of Richmond, which is the one branch of the Federal Reserve that surveys CFOs for current events in the economy. And they said, the head of the Richmond Fed said, jobs are being wiped out in coding, collections, call centers, and other areas that I mentioned, like marketing and so forth. So even government officials are publicly talking about this now. So learn from them. And I hope you take my words to heart. Change your career now, because here's what happens. Let's say that the biggest retail stores all start to get humanoid robots replacing people to work in retail stores. There'll still be a couple of people, but mostly robots. That's millions of jobs eliminated. Millions. So if you're one of millions trying to change your career, versus one of a few right now, you can see the difference. It's way, 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 way easier to change your career when you're one of a few than one of millions. So I hate to say this. I really hate to say this. But during the Great Depression, about 1/3 of people were unemployed. That was the highest in United States history. Learn from that. That is in the realm of possibility due to AI and robotics. It is. What happens when 1/3 of the people are unemployed? It gets ugly. It's a very desperate situation. The good news is 2/3 of the people were still employed. Why? Because they picked jobs that were relatively immune to the economic cycle, meaning expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. This time you want to pick jobs that require the human touch and are relatively immune to AI, robotics, and these other big idea things that we talked about today. The ball's in your court. As Spock said, live long and prosper. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.